All right, I'd like to welcome Professor Rob Waring. Please begin your presentation. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me well enough. So today I'm going to be talking about word learning, as you can see. I've had a strong interest in word learning for the last pretty much 30 years or so. My PhD is in word learning, and I've spent quite a lot of time going around the world talking about word learning and how we learn words systematically. And some of you may know that I'm involved with extensive reading. And the extensive reading comes out of my primary love, which is for the love of vocabulary. So I want to just go through some basic principles here. I'm sure most of you have heard of some of these things, but I'm trying to put them into some kind of a framework for you. Now, JALT have put this down as a promotional video, promotional talk, but actually, I'm only going to be talking about one of my websites for like 10 seconds and an app that I've made for about 30 seconds. So it's not really a promotional talk at all. Anyway, let's get going. So what do we know about vocabulary teaching? Most vocabulary teaching is from context. It's usually with textbooks. It's usually quite haphazard selection of materials. That is, there's not a lot of systematic selection of materials. Most course books and materials we use tend to be thematic based. So you'd have, for example, a unit on sports in one unit, and then the next unit would be on, say, travel, and another one would be on medicine and something like that. And we tend not to worry in course materials about which words are needed. So it's quite haphazard in the way we select materials. We often have different vocabulary in each topic, as I said, and often there's too many words. There's sometimes 30, 40 words in some materials, which is too much to learn in 1 week. We often focus on rare words rather than common words. And the bulk of the meaning of English is in the 1,000 most frequent words of English and all the multiple meaning senses that they have. But people tend to focus a lot on the rarer words because they're sort of easier to teach in a way. We tend to focus on single words, not multi-word units or combinations. Students tend to learn the same words. They're all have to go through the same textbook or learn the same word lists and so on. A lot of teaching just basically means this is the definition, this is the spelling and pronunciation, that's the end. We get relatively, particularly in course materials, we get relatively little deep teaching of the way that words work. So it tends to be surface level, like here's the meaning, here's the spelling, pronunciation, you're on your own. And it tends to be the teachers give meanings. Well, here, teacher, I could also mean the course book. Students tend not to have to work out much of the vocabulary for themselves. Usually materials will tell them. There's quite low recycling of vocabulary in course books. We'll look at this a little bit later. Teachers often leave the vocab learning to learners. They basically don't teach students how to learn effectively. So when I ask my students about vocabulary learning, most of their techniques that they use are quite poor and not good enough. I'm not going to be talking so much about techniques in this talk, but students very often are not taught how to learn words well. So they're not taught how to learn good strategies or good techniques. Teachers rarely set vocabulary learning goals like 200 words this semester, 1,000 words this year. Very few teachers, very few of my students tell me that they've ever been taught how to use a dictionary, although it's the most important book they will ever use for language learning. Very few students are told actually how to use their books, their dictionaries well. And students, because they don't use the dictionary well, they often use them poorly, and therefore they look up words to get the wrong meaning senses, and there's lots of information in there that they miss. Teachers tend not to encourage vocabulary books. When students do record words, they tend to record them in lists or randomly, like on this page, and randomly on another piece of paper. They're not systematically kept. And when you look at vocabulary exercises, most often they are tests. They are not actually teaching things. They are actually tests. So you have to fill in the correct word, for example, yeah? So in print, basically, you can see that teachers trust a coursebook to deal with the vocabulary. So we're going to go through what we know about vocabulary learning first, and then we'll look at a sort of a roadmap for us. There's quite a lot here, and it's quite heavy. This is being recorded, so you can go back and look at it at any time. As you'd have seen, there was a QR code at the beginning. There's a QR code at the end. If you want to download it, please take it and use it. So let's go through some basic principles. I've just got 10 here. There are more, but these are just a few of the basic ones. Okay, so the first thing is we need to understand what a word is. Well, this is a word, use, but is uses, used, and using, are they the same word or are they different words? Now, some people would say it's the same word because it's the same meaning, but other people say, no, actually it's a different word, it's a different spelling. What about users? Are they different from use? Is that the same word as use or not? What about at use of something? Is that the same as the verb to use? Some people say yes, some people say no. What about the derived forms, misuse, unusable? Are they the same word as use or a different word? This then gets even more complex when we start to have two-part words like pencil case or traffic light or the day after tomorrow, as soon as. Even phrases like let the cat out of the bag, an idiom, or maybe phrasal verbs, set up, bring on, go over. And even when we get down to proper nouns. Are these words or not words? And this is important because if you say, I taught 200 words or I'm planning to teach 200 words, do you mean 200 words like this? Or do you mean, I'm just going to put my spotlight on. Do you mean 200 words like this? Or do you mean all of those is one word? Or do you mean all of that is one word? Or do you mean all of that is one word? So it really impacts what we're trying to do when we think about how much we're going to be teaching. What we do know is that there's a lot to learn. There are 2,000 core useful words everybody needs. About 4,000 words are needed to become lower, advanced, and about 9,000 word families are needed to read native texts without a dictionary. So that's quite a lot of words. The average university student coming into Japan to a Japanese English department knows about 2,000 words. Their professors know somewhere between 6,000 to 7,000 words. But if you want to be native-like, you're going to need 25 to 30,000 word families. So what's a family? Well, a family is, we construct these things differently. So the verb form would be, say, use and used. The inflected forms we would add there, and we collectively call them the lemma. If we include the other form, so verb and noun form, we would then call that the phlegma. If we then include the derived forms, that is the family. So those are the sort of technical terms. We have the main form, the lemma, the phlegma, and the family. So I'm going to be talking today about the family. The next thing is there are many different types of vocabulary. So as we saw before, we have individual words, we have the derived forms, multi-part words, lexical phrases, idioms, and sentence heads. We can call these lexical items or vocabulary if you wish. So there's many, many, many types of vocabulary. These are, because they're straightforward, they have a single meaning, they can often be memorized. But there are other types of words like collocations and colligations, high season, mild cheese, blonde hair. These also are, we might call words, or colligations, which is agree to do, agree on. So this is the grammatical relationship between the main word and often its preposition or maybe an adverb. So we say agree on something, we don't agree with something, we agree with someone, yes? We have an effect on, but we don't say have effect something, okay? So all of these, and these collocations and colligations often have to be picked up. There are dozens and dozens of collocations for some words. So this word idea, these are the collocations for the word idea, to abandon an idea, absorb an idea, accept an idea, and so on. There's lots and lots and lots of those. They are all part of the task of vocabulary learning. These are the adjective uses. Before I showed you the verb uses. These are the adjective uses of the word use. So we're talking about a huge number of word relationships for even a basic word like idea. So the task is very, very large. On top of all of that, students also are going to need some expressions, and we've seen a few of them here. right? So these are expressions and idioms the students are going to be needing on top of that. So imagine now that you have to make a decision. You've got some material in front of you and you've got these words. Which of these words would you teach? And which of these words would you not teach? This is a critical decision that teachers have to make every day. Do I have to teach this? Do I need it? Does it need my time? Or can I just leave it? Is it important enough? Is it not important enough? And my own study and the study of other people has shown that actually teachers are worse than the students at being able to choose which words are ones which should be learnt or not learnt. So if we just look at these particular texts here, if we look at the statistics for this from the British National Corpus, we can see that this word out of is ranked the 177th most frequent lexical form in the British National Corpus. In front of is the 1,500th. And it occurs 65 times per million words. So we could probably say that somewhere around here is going to need teaching time. After about here, we probably don't need to teach this. It's just not worth teaching straightforward because it appears only one time per million words. It's just not worth teaching. But that is a word that probably will be defined in a course book, right? So we have to have a good awareness of this, and I encourage all of you to have a good, long look at lexical frequencies to get a feeling for which words are really useful and are needed. So teachers are not good at this, generally speaking. Coursebook writers are generally not good at this. We're not bad. We're quite good at being able to notice the very high frequency ones. We're very good at noticing the very low frequency, but where it really matters, which is in the middle, that's where we're really quite poor. What we also know is that most multi-word units are not worth teaching individually. So for a typical collocation, the two words in the collocation, like blonde hair, are going to be less frequent than the words that make them up. So blonde hair is less frequent than blonde and hair put together. And we see this in an examination of the British National Corpus. If we take the word strong, it occurs 213 times for every million words. The word wind occurs 73 times, but strong wind only 3 times in a million words. This is a very, very transparent collocation, right? For two quite useful words. What that's saying is that it's much less useful, and it's very transparent, so we just do not need to spend time on this. However, what we might call a difficult word, the word compromise, occurs 31 times every million words, which is 10 times more common than strong wind. So sometimes as teachers, we need to be aware of what actually needs our time and doesn't need our time. What this means is that most collocations are not worth teaching individually. There are different types of collocations. There's transparent weak collocations, like the one we saw before with strong wind, beautiful flower, look out of a window, read a book. You can get this simply from the base meanings of the words. But specialized collocations like Insolvency Act, Habeas Corpus, Fait accompli, these will only be teaching if you need them very specifically for your domain. But there's lots of very infrequent words like by and large or glimmer of hope, rancid butter, just don't need our teaching time. They occur much less than 1 million times, or 1 in 1 million times, yeah? Ones that do need our attention are highly frequent collocations, particularly ones that cause confusion. So make your bed, do the laundry, make dinner, and so on, and do the dishes, yes? So make and do, these are worth our time because students do make mistakes with them. And also where there's false friends. So we, in Japanese, we say kocha ga usui, weak tea, or thin tea, yes, thin tea, usui. So students will say the tea is usui, rather than they will say that tea is weak. We often hear our students say, oh, I played with my friends on the weekend, right? Because they have the miscollocation of meet my friends rather than play with my friends. They don't understand how asobu has a different set of meanings to it compared to the word play. So we teach only those words which are really highly frequent and very useful. The next part is there are two main stages of vocabulary learning, and this causes tremendous confusion amongst teachers, because although everybody knows that there's a form-meaning relationship, which includes matching the spelling and sound to a meaning, so the word apple is apple, apple, this is where vocabulary learning stops. And when we're talking about, oh, I need to teach vocabulary, or my students have learned vocabulary, we tend to only talk about this level. We tend not to talk about this. So when teachers say, oh, my students are learning vocabulary, they're meaning this. They're not meaning the deeper aspect of vocabulary, the multiple meaning senses or nuances, the frequency, how we use it in context. Is it a scientific word, a medical word, a technology word? What are the restrictions on the use? When can you use this? When can you not use this? What's the pragmatic value of this particular word? Is it polite or casual, spoken, written, formal, informal? Teachers don't teach this. We don't spend so much time on building speed of access. How quickly can they find it in their head when listening and when reading? How do we build automaticity? And collocation and colligation. In the last few years, some textbooks are starting to do with collocation and colligation, but only in very unsystematic ways. So this difference is very important because it impacts on what type of teaching materials and activities you have. If we only do activities that's focusing on this, and we don't do activities that focus on this, we're going to have a problem with our students learning how to use words. Partly because there's a lot to know about the word, and this table comes from Paul Nation's work. There's a difference between the form, what it looks like, the meaning, and the use. I'm not going to go through all of these things, but I'm sure you're all familiar with this. There's a spoken form, written form, there's the word parts, there's the meaning, the concepts it's with, its associations, what grammatical patterns, collocations, and constraints it's got. So if you want to know our word well, you need to be able to answer all of these things about a particular word. So how much of this is actually done by our course book and by our teachers? Not a lot, but it's a huge amount the students need to learn. Similarly, there are various states of knowing. So you either know a word really, really well, or you know it partly, or you know it hardly at all. So some word might be well known and you can use it productively in your speaking or writing. It might be well known, but it's not available for speaking. It just doesn't come when you need to speak. Or you can recognize it and you say, oh, that means, yes, it means so-and-so. Or you just don't recognize it. So we have different states of knowing. And this is important because when we look at vocabulary size, this is another problem we have. We talk about the students knowing 2,000 words. What does that mean? A student knows 2,000 words. So if you give students a test of vocabulary, let's say a vocabulary test, and they test out at 2,000 words, what do they know about these words? So this is the 2,000 words that they know. Inside that vocabulary, there are some words which they know really, really, really well. Some of the other words are slow access. These words they know really, really well. These are slow access vocabulary, which they can get sometimes. And these are the words maybe that they guessed. So this is the fast, fluent access vocabulary. These are the words they recognize slowly, or maybe they guessed on the test, right? So there's different types of vocabulary. But what we do know is if students want to read extensively, then the subset of that vocabulary is fast, fluent access vocabulary. Although they know on the test 2,000 words, their fluent access vocabulary is a quarter or a third of that. And that really impacts when we are choosing materials for students. So if your students know 2,000 words, they should be reading 600 level graded readers. So about 25 to 40% of your vocabulary size is your fluent reading vocabulary. So 600 words is your fluent recognition vocabulary. Students should not be having materials at their tested vocabulary level, because they will slow down their reading and they will not be reading extensively. They'll be reading intensively. The next thing we know about vocabulary is it's going to take some time. So with intentional conscious learning through word cards, it takes 10 to 15 meetings of a word to learn it. But we cannot learn the deeper aspects of vocabulary this way. We can't learn the collocations, we can't learn politeness, we can't learn lexical access speed, we can't learn colligations easily this way. So we're stuck to that form meaning level of learning. The other way is incidental learning, picking up from exposure. So you're reading your book and then, oh, here's a new word. Listening to something, oh, there's a new word. This knowledge is very fragile. The meeting is often very brief, and within usually a minute or two, certainly within 5 minutes, the meaning has been gone from the students, particularly if they've used an electronic dictionary. The meaning disappears even quicker than with a paper, having looked it up in a paper dictionary. So paper wins over digital. But we know from incidental learning, just from reading, you need to meet the word 20, 50 times before it's learned. But this is very rare for a word to be met 20 or 50 times in a graded reader, for example. So it's not usually strong enough to be retained in the long term. In a typical textbook, we would find that a word would be taught maybe in the unit, but met only 2 or 3 times later in the unit, which is insufficient for vocabulary learning. What we do know is students need to go through the cycle of learning, and this is going to take some time. They need to notice something, they need to add it to their knowledge, and then they need to try it out in their own production. When they're trying it out in their writing or their speaking, then they will get feedback from the teacher, from their friend, that they've used it well. So you might find the teacher goes like, huh? What did you mean? Oh, there's a red pen. The student notices, whoops, I made a mistake. I need to go back and study. So it takes a long time for students to go around this cycle of learning. We also know that vocabulary is distributed in networks, and this is just this is not scientific in the sense that somebody has actually computed this, but this is just an example of how we make connections between words in semantic groups. So the word earth and soil is connected to field, floor, ground, debris, which is also connected to dust, which is connected to pollen, and so on. So we store words in networks. And this is particularly well shown by fMRI studies that look at where words are put. So for encoding words, for putting new words into your head, these are the regions of the brain on the left lateral and left medial areas of the brain, which are used for encoding words. For recalling words, we use them in different places. And recall for immediate versus long term, we can see a difference there. Now, I'm not going to go in through all the details of this, but, and I'm not that familiar with myself, but the point is that different parts of the brain are working when we're working with vocabulary, and that knowledge is networked. It's not just put in one place. We also, what's connected to this is that we have mental representations. So if we take 4 words like catch, late, bus, and John, we can make a sentence like John caught the bus because he was late. And that has a particular meaning. But we could take exactly the same words, John caught the bus so he was late, has a very different meaning, right? But caught the bus because he was late, usually he walks. He caught the bus so he was late, the bus was slow. And the last one, John caught the late bus, of course, is the midnight bus, right? So depending on which words we use in which order, in what sentences, are going to bring up very different mental representations. And course books tend to not really have a deep, rich set of mental representations. We also need the background information. So if you look at a platypus, and this is our platypus here, if you take a sentence like the platypus did not want to move, she was curled around her eggs to protect them, what's the meaning here? Whose eggs are they? Either A, it's the platypus's eggs, she's trying to protect them, or it's another animal's egg she wants to eat. So anybody got an idea? A or B? A or B, anybody? No answers. Is it A or B? Whose eggs are they? A. Yes, right. So they're her eggs, because a platypus, if you may or might not know, is one of only 2 animals which lay eggs. Now, if you didn't know this, you would automatically think B, right? Because people don't expect a platypus to have eggs, if you don't know much about platypuses. There's only two animals in the world which have, two mammals in the world which have eggs. One's a platypus and the other one is an echidna. Both of them are found in Australia. So this background knowledge is really important for comprehending. The next thing that's crucially important, this is probably the most important slide for the whole presentation, probably the most important slide in education. Learning does not mean remembering. Because you've learned something you studied in a book does not mean you've remembered it. We know from science that if you teach 20 words today, we know that many of those words are going to be forgotten within a day, a week, 2 weeks, and a month. We all know this. For example, do you remember the names of all of the students in your class last year? Can you remember what you had for breakfast last week? So we all forget. But the point is that a lot of the things that we do about vocabulary does not fight this forgetting, and that's a problem. What we do know, as I was talking before, was that there are some words which are more frequent than others. We have high frequency words, like the word the is the most frequent word in English. It occupies 6% of the whole of the English language. 1 in 18 words is the word the. Now, the low frequency words down here, as you can see, do not occur very often. So the word the occurs in 6% of any text. 25 different words, most of these are pronouns or prepositions, cover 50% of the volume of any text. 1,000 words covers 80 to 82% of any text, and 3,000 words covers 85 to 90% of any text. So that shows that some words are more important than others, and we need to remember that. However, most words that appear in course books, only 40% of them appear 1 to 2 times per text, and this is not enough for learning. If you look at the breakdown of the words in typical course books or course book series, 40% of them are only met about 1 or 2 times. Very few of them are met more frequently than that. And partly the reason for that is because when we are writing materials and when we're teaching, we tend to use this as our model of how to teach or how to learn. Many people think that the learning of vocabulary is a job like collecting pieces for a jigsaw puzzle. The belief is that if I collect pieces, if I collect words, if I collect pieces of my jigsaw puzzle, and I learn this word and this word and this word, eventually I'll have all the pieces for my puzzle, and I will be able to master English. The problem is, of course, that you have no idea what this picture is about. It's a little bit in a similar way to stamp collecting. Many people approach the learning of vocabulary like they're collecting stamps. They're collecting this item, collecting that item, but they're not seeing them as a system. Okay? And the reason what that leads to is that it leads to one-hit teaching or one-hit learning. A vast majority of materials that our students are meeting are structured in this way, where each unit has a different vocabulary and it has different grammar. And we go from this one to this one to this one to this one. Now, these sporting words are rarely met, maybe in Unit 8 about technology or Unit 15 about science. These words tend to be one-hit wonders only. And so the syllabus is often linear. The theory behind this, in terms of the way we write materials, is the students have met this grammar and they've met this vocabulary. We have finished the unit, therefore they have finished learning. We don't need to teach it again. Learning is perfect now. They've done that, they've learned it, so we can move on. That's the theory behind this structure. Now, you and I know this is absolutely not what we need, because if we look at what's going to happen to this, well, our forgetting curve is going to kick in and is going to definitely work on our students to help them to forget, because they're not repeating and recycling these words. So what needs to happen is we need to have where the students meet their word for the first time here, which would be from their textbook or from, say, word learning. But as it's being forgotten, it needs to be met again soon so that it will be remembered. but it will start to be forgotten again, but so it needs to be reviewed again, and so on and so on. So the textbooks tend to do the first two. After that, well, it's just going straight away. So this has to be done through extensive reading. So the two must go together. So what students need now is massive practice. Now I'm going to show you a table of data. Please, I hope your eyes don't get all confused by it. So I'm going to show you how many words will you learn from incidentally reading this amount of text. So here we go. So if your students meet 20,000 words, 221 of those words will be met more than 10 times, which is just enough to have it learned. If they meet 50,000 words, 630 of those words will meet the condition of being met 10 times. There's an additional 699 words of the 2,000, inside the 2,000 total words they've read, right? This is 2,000 words long. This is 699 different words. 699 different words will have been met 3 to 9 times. So they'll have some partial knowledge of 699 words. But 1,755 words will have been largely forgotten out of this 2,000. They met a total of 2,600 different words inside there. For 50,000, they met 4,000, 100,000, 6,000, and so on. So if your students meet 500,000 words, they will have learnt 3,000 words, 2,000 partially known, and probably 5,600 they would have forgotten. Now, I want you to notice that 3,000 words there. It takes 500,000 words of reading to meet and learn 3,000 words. But this is 3,000 words too. To move from 6,000 to 9,000, this is 3 million words. This is 500,000. So what that shows is that as your vocabulary increases, you need more words. You need to meet more words in order to keep building your vocabulary. So what this is telling us here is that it's quite easy to build a simple vocabulary. Basic vocabulary, elementary level is not difficult. Intermediate is going to take some time. To be advanced level is going to take a really long time. And down here are the percentages. You can see here, we start up with a small percentage of known and it gets slightly bigger. And it's only up to 66% of the words are actually known out of those 5 million words. Another way to look at exactly the same data is to say, if you want your students to be elementary level, they need to meet 150,000 words, which is 140 graded readers. And it'll take them about 66 hours. If you want them to be intermediate, that would be 300,000, another 50 readers, plus 80 more hours, and so on. To get to the advanced level, your students are going to need 1.6 million words, and 140 plus 50 plus 80 plus 100 graded readers to get to that volume of text. So if the students do only 2 minutes of reading a day, it's going to take them 20 years to meet this 1.6 million words. If they do only 2 minutes of reading a day. 5 minutes is going to take them 8 years. 10 minutes is 4 years. 15 minutes will take them 2.8 years. And 20 minutes will take them 2 years. That's to get to 1.6 million words. And it's a big but. This is only done by an analysis of computer. This does not tell us the difference between, this only looks at individual words. It does not look at the second meaning senses. It does not include collocations, colligations, lexical phrases, does not include other members of the word family. So I would at least double, maybe triple this amount of language in order to master the deeper aspects of vocabulary, second meaning senses, idioms, and so on. So we're talking here about a huge amount of material students need to learn. So what do we know about vocabulary from all of that? Well, we do know that our students do not get enough exposure to text. Learners meet too little language. There's not enough language in course books and course materials. We do know that words live with other words, not in isolation. So they're going to need collocations and colligations, which can only be picked up from exposure. They cannot be taught intentionally. They're too infrequent. We know that written and spoken vocabulary are different. The grammar of vocabulary and the grammar of speaking are quite different. I haven't talked about that, but we do need a smaller vocabulary for speaking than we do for writing. We know that some words are more difficult to learn than others. Some words you can pick up immediately, particularly if they're in your first language. The word takushi, for example, you'll pick up very quickly. Pizza, you'll pick up quickly. But more words which are more multiple meaning senses, more abstract words might take 50, 60, even 100 meetings. So students, so we saw from the data, should learn the most frequent and useful words first, and later they should specialize. So those high frequency words are the ones they really need to focus on first. We do also know from research that learners cannot guess a new meaning of a word from context if the surrounding text is too difficult. So they need to know about 98% of the other words on the page when they are reading to be able to pick up a meaning of a word and think, oh, I think I know what this word means. Only 2% of the words should be not known for them to be able to guess successfully from context when they're reading something incidentally. We all therefore know that not all words are equally frequent or equally useful. We need to know as teachers, we need to know which words are frequent, have a good sense of which words are worth teaching in our own heads. As I said, research shows that we're not actually very good at this. Often as teachers and materials writers, we focus too much on the one-hit learning. We're doing new thing today, new thing tomorrow, new thing the day after, new thing the day after, and forgetting. So we need to have much more systematic building on previous knowledge. There are relatively few chances to network knowledge to build a sense of language. Why? Because students meet very little language in course books. Even the reading component in a course book is what, 300, 400 words? There is no way you're going to build enough exposures to be able to build a sense of how a word works with other words in different contexts. We don't spend enough time as teachers focusing on skill building and networking knowledge, and particularly do not spend enough time doing systematic, intentional learning, particularly at the intermediate level. Systematic. An awful lot of learning is not systematic. It is random learning, and it's not fighting the forgetting curve, and I'll come back to that in a minute. We also know that because we teach a word does not mean it's learned. There's not enough time fighting forgetting in our classes. Initial word knowledge is very, very fragile. And so all of these points we need to be aware of when we are teaching vocabulary. So what do we do about it? Well, first of all, we need to understand the function of the activities that we do. We need to make a balanced curriculum of activities so that we have a correct, appropriate balance of activities. We need to ensure the learners understand the learning activities they're doing and why they're doing it. So they can say, oh, I'm building this type of vocabulary. Oh, I'm building that vocabulary. This activity is not good for building that type of vocabulary knowledge. And we have to make sure that the learning is effective and efficient. So those are things we need to do. So a framework that's a sort of an easy visual framework to use for this is something I call the balanced curriculum. So we can think of it in two different directions here. We can think of it as the type of work that we do and whether it's receptive or whether it's productive. So these are receptive, listening and reading, productive, speaking and writing. So if we're focused on language study, learning new stuff, this is where we are. We're working at this top row. So this is where we'd learn new stuff from, say, a textbook, and we'd check our understanding through maybe some kind of a test. So we learn something, we check our knowledge. This is all about learning how learning what something is and getting control, this initial stage of learning. We also need to give students practice with fluency, getting used to using the word, using it in context, finding its word partners, and building connections, which we do through extensive reading, listening, and maybe watching movies. But also give students a chance to practice their production of language through speaking or through writing. So this framework here is a useful one for teachers and for students to get into their heads. So let's look at each one individually. But first, let's just review. This top row is where we would use textbooks, worksheets, and so on, with the materials often done as a class. The students use typically the same material. It might involve phonics or alphabet work, vocab building, focused on grammar and vocabulary, reading skills, text structure. This is all study. Down here, this is practice, right? So that's the study, practice. Reading and speaking to learn something, yeah? So we use graded readers, they choose their own books. We're working on fluency and speed, focus on comprehension, understanding stories, understanding a video, understanding something, and getting natural reading practice. And this is a similar idea to when you're learning the piano. When you're learning the piano, you have a teacher telling you what to do, both showing you what to do and then checking your mistakes and saying, no, 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 do that, do this, right? So you get feedback. Learning and feedback in a controlled environment. Here, you will listen to music and listen to a piece of music to try and get a sense of how the music would work, and then you will start to play your own music. So this has applications in other fields. So let's look at this first box here, the language study receptive box. This is where explicit teaching will go on, dictionary work, studying from a grammar book, intensive activities, language awareness activities, conscious word learning. These are aimed to build language awareness, build basic study skills, how to use a dictionary, how to learn words well, to build a form meaning level of word relationships of phrases and words, and to discriminate between meaning senses. What's the difference between let and make or force? And to build systemic derivational knowledge, to learn the affixes, to learn how they go, how words work. The next box, so that's, for example, dictionary use, word cards, teacher teaching you something, and you're using various apps. These are various word learning apps, Quizlet, Memrise, Word Engine, and my own app called Word Learner. If you're interested in using this, they're all based on likeness memory system. The idea is that students meet the word once. If they get it correct, it goes to this box. They get it correct, it goes to the next box. The next time, 3 days later, they learn it. If it's correct, they keep going to the next box. However, if they make a mistake, it goes back to the beginning. So this is systematically building on previous knowledge. And all of these apps have this systematic function to them. If you're interested in Word Learner, it has different types of materials. We have preset word lists like the new general service list, the new academic word list. If you wish, you can put your own word list in there for your students, or you can scan a QR code on some websites and the words automatically appear in the app for the students to learn. So you set up the class on Word Learner, you give them a code, and then you just track their learning. Word Learner has a built-in dictionary, has 8 different games, and lots and lots of different word lists. So please check it out. Another thing we might do in this activity is to check understanding. So we would do this type of vocabulary activity, or maybe we get students to do this type of activity, or we get them to use a textbook where they would get some new words, for example, or some words will be given to them. These are all part of this first box of learning. The second box, we're looking at control production activities, where there's language and pronunciation drills, gap fill exercises, memorized dialogues. This is all about control. The idea of these activities is to check you understand the meaning of the words. Do I know this word? Can I tell the difference between word A and word B? So here we're checking the spelling, we're checking the pronunciation, we're checking we got the correct word, and also whether we got controlled use of the word. We talked before about meaning, form, and use. So these activities, all the ones at the top here, are focused on can you use it correctly? The top here is all about accuracy. So this is an example where I see students here are just practicing to get it right, practicing to get it right. Or they'll be doing some kind of activities from their textbook, gap fill, fill in the blanks, these type of activities you're all familiar with. These are all this second box, controlled production, checking we get something right. The third box down here in the communication side of things, the fluency, the deeper aspects of vocabulary, we would use easy reading activities, easy listening, graded readers, for example, watching movies, browsing the internet, if they are easy. If they are difficult, they become study activities. So here, these activities are designed to build massive language practice, build fluency and lexical access speed I talked about, build a sense of how the words and grammar go together. How does this word connect to that one? What sounds good as a collocation? What doesn't sound good as a collocation? Also to build contextual background knowledge so that you know, for example, a platypus has eggs so that you can understand. And also to build this network, deeper knowledge of collocation, colligation, how words and grammar go together, build this sense of how the whole language fits together as a system, and to help students to learn to read and listen naturally and build autonomy. That's what we're doing down in this box. And we do that with graded readers. Here are some examples. Here's some more examples of graded readers. So the reading should build on previous knowledge. And the graded readers, if we look at our syllabus, the graded readers are systematically designed to build on the work of course materials. So level 1 books would only deal with the very early grammar and vocabulary from that book. So it has only this grammar and vocabulary. Level 2 would have this grammar, new vocabulary and grammar, plus the previous vocabulary and grammar. So this is systematically building on previous knowledge. Level 3 materials would have this grammar and vocabulary plus, 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 plus. And the idea here is, as I said, to build systematically on previous knowledge so that we can strengthen the knowledge and fight the forgetting curve. And you can do this online if you wish through ER Central, which is my website, or through a website like X Reading, for example. These all have materials in these days of COVID, might be very useful for you. We should have students to just read materials for fun, like a newspaper, or just read and listen to stories, or maybe watch some movies will be perfectly fine if they find it easy to do. In the last box down here, we need to have the students doing free production activities. These free production activities could include casual conversations, for example, debates or discussions, emails, online chat, diary writing, essays, and so on and so on. These types of activities are going to be building the students' ability to learn to write and speak naturally, to get important feedback, to check on communicative success. I showed you the cycle of learning before, where the students will notice something, they will add it to their knowledge, they now need to try it out. Do I know this word? You're going to try it out. When you feel comfortable with it, you're going to try it out to see whether I get it right or not in my writing or in my speaking. So they're going to experiment with their language use. If we don't give them chances to write and chances to speak, then they will not be able to experiment and they will not finish the cycle of learning. And again, we're trying to build autonomy here. So these are some activities, as you can see, writing something, free writing. Notice this is very different from writing, completing sentences. This is my writing with my message, what I want to do, my choice. So this is all about me experimenting with my own language. Or they're writing a letter or an email to someone, or maybe just chatting with a friend where you just talk about what you want to talk about. The teacher's not told you what to do. You're just talking about what you want to do. This is you experimenting and trying your language out. Or you might give a presentation, give a speech, and so on and so on. So these type of activities in this balanced curriculum, if we're doing all of these parts, then we will have a proper curriculum for our students. However, we need to also make sure we don't forget our skill training. So the students need to understand the 4 parts of the balanced curriculum. They need to spend an appropriate balance of time in each box. What I find in my research is that students spend far too much time at that top level. Too much time doing course materials intensive learning, being tested, doing testing materials. Far too much time is in that top level, which is all about new material, but it's being forgotten through the forgetting curve doing its work. So we're not recycling and deepening that knowledge, and therefore a lot of it gets forgotten. And this explains very handily why, after 6, 7, 8 years of English, many Japanese students cannot communicate. They can understand something, they can maybe take a test, but they can't speak or they can't write well. Why? They've not had that a massive amount of practice to deepen and consolidate and to strengthen that knowledge to make it into something they can use in their writing and speaking. We need to teach them how to use a dictionary. We need to teach them how to learn words effectively. And so what are effective strategies? What are not effective strategies? I asked my students the other day, and what they tend to do is they get a word, apple, and they just write it again. Apple, 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 apple. This seems to be the #1 vocabulary learning strategy and probably is the weakest one I can think of. The reason for that is it's only based on form. There's no meaning connection there. You're just based on the form. You don't know what the meaning is. And I think the reason they do that is because when they were learning kanji, they had to learn how to write the kanji beautifully. But when you're writing apple, you don't need to write it beautifully, right? That's not the task. But they've carried it over from kanji that by writing again and again and again, it's going to help. What needs to happen is they need to use that word in a sentence or be creative with the sentence or do something else with it, put it on a word cloud. They need to test themselves. But students tend not to do these better activities. They tend to use quite poor activities. And they tend to use a word book that's got all the words and things printed on one page in a systematic, beg your pardon, in a way that is not able to be changed. So often what happens is that they're learning words, some of the words they know, some of the words they don't know, and the words are not getting the right amount of attention. So we need to move away from the word books or cut the words out of the book and then learn them individually. We need to teach students the most important vocabulary strategy. There is nothing more important as a vocabulary strategy than teaching students how to guess the meaning words of from context. Nothing more important than this. Students are not good at it, particularly Japanese students who are basically told to be passive and just learn what I've told you. But they're going to need this. Most of the words you learned as a native speaker will learn from context. And if students get to a test, there'll be lots of words they don't know. If they're not good at guessing words from context, they will not do well on the test. So what we do know is that students who have been taught systematically how to learn words from context tend to do better on tests. But when I say teach this, and I don't mean like one lesson and drop it, I mean systematically, at once or twice a week, get them to do it. Please try to prevent them having the dictionary reflex where they just dive into the dictionary for every word that they do not know. This is the biggest failing for many, many students in Japan. They go straight to the dictionary without making the mental effort and working out what this would be and then checking in the dictionary later, right? So please make sure you try and ask them to sit on the dictionary, put the dictionary at the back of the class or whatever. And when they have looked in the dictionary, they don't record the words. So have little word cards, maybe pieces of paper on your desk, put them in an envelope, like a word bank, so that they can then study them at the beginning of next class. We need to teach students how to read faster so they can build lexical access speed. And we need to teach them how to select the best input. We need to teach them to choose the right kind of reading material, the right kind of listening material that is just right for them at their level so that they can learn. Whether this is intensive or whether this is extensive, they need to be given material which is just a little bit above where they are, not way too difficult, because that will just demotivate people. So we need to train them how to find material at the right level for themselves and how to become independent learners. So I've gone very quickly over that. You can have this PowerPoint if you wish. I'm also recording this session. So if you want to go back over it, please do so. And please, you can email me. So thank you for your time. Here is the PowerPoint if you need it. and you can contact me there. And we have about,
You have about 6
5 minutes
minutes.
and 2 seconds for questions.
There you go. If you have a
Off you
question,
go.
please unmute your mic. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, do you encourage or discourage them from writing the meaning in Japanese next to it when they record it for their personal dictionary?
I think that particularly if the word is one that has a one-to-one correspondence, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If the word, for example, has a slightly different meaning sense, like the word unique, for example, has a slightly different meaning sense, I would get them to make a note about that. I don't think it's a problem at the form meaning level. So where they just get that initial learning, but when they start to use it, they might not be able to use it well. So we need to get them to meet that word in context. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's much harder actually for beginning level learners to actually write a definition in English.
Yes.
So I don't think it's harmful, but we need to remind students that there's not always a one-to-one connection between a word in one language and a word in another. They have different connotations, different collocations, different way of doing these things. So it's not harmful, but it's better than nothing.
Okay.
Greg, I think.
Rob, great stuff. I typed
Greg.
2 things into the chat.
Did you? Okay, right.
No problem. But in the blue graph with the 150 graded readers to get to the
Yep.
Of course, that's predicated on the readers they're reading of being 1,000 word count is the way the math there works out, because they need to have those 150 readers to get to 150,000 words.
Right. Okay. So I
If
need to explain
they're
this.
reading lower level readers, they're going to need more books than that simply because the word count in the book is not.
Correct. Okay. So the way I derived this was some research I did some years ago, which I still haven't published, which was I've got a massive corpus of graded readers, about 8 or 9 million words of graded readers. Yeah. Threw that all into a computer and then did an analysis. And I broke them up by what level they were. So this is the level 1, book 2, 3, 4, 5 on the ERF scale. And I then worked out how many books, what the average length of the books were at that level, then did the math and calculated it all out. I'll explain to you later exactly how it was done.
Cool
it's
stuff.
actually published some on my website. So yes, the graded readers are shorter at those early levels, so therefore they will read more, but they would have to read more materials for the same volume of text. The advanced level books, you may have like 4 books only covers like, 20 books at the beginner's level. Yes.
It kind of norms itself out then because of the big corporate.
That's right.
Understood.
Yeah.
Hi, your
Yes, Carolyn.
PowerPoint says that I don't have access
to
the PowerPoint. The
Oh.
QR code, it says ask the file owner to get access.
Ooh. Okay, I'm not quite sure why that would be. Because it's on my Dropbox. Okay, I will sort that out, and please email me if you can't.
Worked for me, Rob.
Did?
It does work. I just did it.
Okay, we'll try again. Okay.
It
All right,
worked for
fine.
me
If you can't,
too.
Caroline, please email me, and I'll send you another link.
Okay.
Anybody, just send. I'll send you a link. No problem. Any other questions, please? Stupid questions are okay.
What's your favorite graded reader?
I don't have one. I don't have one. No. So what I'm trying to do here in this session is just try to pull together what I know about the basic principles of vocabulary from teaching perspective. And I would just check that all of you are making sure that your students are getting massive practice and it's not just new all the time. I think that's a major problem in the way that we construct our courses and things. Yeah. Phil, did you have a question? Did I see you put your hand up? No, it's okay. It's all right, Phil.
Sorry, can I go?
Yes, please.
Actually, just one thing that a teacher I'm working with does is grab random words from a newspaper article and then have the students make random sentences with them. And what I'm trying to explain to him is that if the text itself is too difficult and they cannot guess the words from context using the text, that they're not going to remember the words or even understand how to use them from this text.
It's random learning.
It's too random. And I think as well, what he seems to think is this practice is enough and there needs to be nothing more done. And if the students have that text and look up the words themselves in the dictionary, that they will learn them. Okay, so there's a dictionary that was published many, many years ago, which I find very useful. And maybe some Japanese dictionaries do it, I can't remember. But they have like a star rating next to the word. So for example, they might have 5 stars, really, really useful word, 2 stars, right? So then say to him, well, ask your students only to look up words which are, say, you know, like 5 stars or 4 stars. Right. And then don't waste your time on the other ones. I would suggest something like that. Well, I also mentioned to him that I think that the articles he chooses, especially for lower levels, because they're not graded at all, he just takes things from the Japan Times. Yes. And because they're trying so hard to be able to understand the text itself, that there's not going to really be any more, you know, room in their brain to actually get the vocabulary, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure how to put it into words. Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. It's random learning. You can see at one side, the guy's trying to help by learning stuff and teaching new stuff. And that's, I think that his view is, I'm a teacher, I need to teach. They need to study. And it's new, one-hit learning. And there's the forgetting going all over the place, right? Right. So I think this is way too common in our industry. Yes. And we don't have that systematic balance. We have too much stuff on course materials. There's nothing wrong with course materials themselves. As of themselves, they're fine, but they only do part of the job, which is to actually teach, you know, the first initial learning of the word, of the grammar, but it doesn't deepen that much. The deepening stuff that matters. Right. So what I would ask him to do is, you know, ask him, could you please recycle those words next week, the week after? Tell students it's going to be a test, but don't tell them when the test is. Right? That's what I tried to tell him, that we should learn, like read the article in class, do some reading strategies in class the first time. Then maybe in the second meeting of the article, you can focus on some of the vocabulary, choosing particular ones, then focus on that vocabulary in context. Sure. With meanings, expand, recycle. Sure. Yeah. But also, I would suggest that he gets articles in a series of things on a similar topic to do what we call narrow reading. Narrow reading. The same topic again and again and again. Hopefully, the words will come back again and again. Or get the students to go out and then research a particular topic. They will all choose different articles on the same story. In my class, actually. On the same story that will bring in the same words, hopefully, from different perspectives. Right. All
right. Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt, but we're out of time. So I'd like to thank Dr. Waring again. Please, everyone, if you could unmute your microphones, and round of applause, please. Thank you very much.
Thanks. We'll go into a breakout room now. If anybody wants to have a chat, please feel free. Yeah, but I do need to get to the ER AGM a little bit after this, so please feel free to do so. If you have any trouble with downloading the PowerPoint, please let me know. And you can use the PowerPoint. It's not copyrighted. Use it, abuse it. Just spread the word, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.